So we have Senator Lincoln Fillmore here with us and Representative Doug Welton. And we're going to talk a little bit about the bell-to-bell policy that they are proposing. First off, so last year you passed an in-class policy that was working well. It was kind of during the class periods, but you're looking to expand it this year to be a bell-to-bell policy. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. This question actually has come up a lot. It came up in the House committee hearing that we had earlier this week. So there are two reasons. One is because both Doug and I wanted to run this policy last year. It was new. Utah was kind of on the cutting edge last year. I think there was some appetite to do something, but maybe not go quite that far. So we dialed the bill back a bit. But in the meantime, so many other states have taken this bell-to-bell approach, and even individual schools within Utah have taken that approach. And I think it's very clear, as you can see in media reports about how this is going, talking with teachers, and just even the emails that I'm sure Doug gets, that I get, about what a difference this is making in class, and where the restriction is more broad-based throughout the school day, what a difference it makes in how kids interact with each other during the school breaks. And I'll just try to illustrate this with one example. I used to be a teacher, and when I was a teacher, cell phones were not at all what they are now. They were actual phones, right? And you would just, they were for phone calls and not much else. But now, of course, they're this massive thing where there are so many different tools, many of which are great, but not all of which are appropriate for school. But when I'm a guest now, teachers will invite me in to come talk to their government classes or things like that. And so when I go, a few years ago, when I'd be there, and people would come into class looking at their phones. And they would sit down and still be looking at their phones. And now, when I go to schools, and I'm there, and kids start coming in for the next class period, they're not on their phones. They are talking to their classmates. And when they sit down in their desk, they are still talking to their classmates. It's fantastic. Even just that small difference, I think makes a huge difference in how kids interact with each other, in the mental health that they see from that standpoint. And I think because of that, there's a much bigger appetite within Utah to take this second step.
Yeah, and if I can jump in there a little bit too, when we looked at it last year, I was really excited to have a cell phone policy, but I wasn't quite on board initially with the bell-to-bell. I was a little hesitant, and I did a little bit of research, and I looked, and the best way to make it effective was a bell-to-bell policy. The schools that were already doing this, that were successful, that had a high rate, it was the bell-to-bell policy that actually made it work the best, because now it's just not the classroom teachers, but it's the administrators in the hallways, and everybody's on the same page, and there's not like these different policies. And this year, coming into my classroom, we've got the kids coming up from the junior high, they expected no cell phones, and high school kids expected no cell phones. And it's been great. In fact, I ran into some high school kids up here the other day, and they said, "Hey, this is the guy who passed the cell phone bill. What do you think?" Right? And
what do they think? Like, what are the students thinking about this?
I think they're okay with it. I mean, there's a few here and there like, I don't like it. But when you drill down, they're all okay with it. And one of the more common comments I get back is, "We're talking with each other more. We have better relationships." And the data in the school. So far, is actually indicating the grades are better and the test scores are better, and there's better interaction with students and their peers. So it's been great.
And so what would you say kind of is the main thrust? Is it more that mental health and behavior, or is it more on the instructional side, or is it a little bit of both?
All of the above. Easily all of the above. I mean, I had a similar experience last year, just before we ran the cell phone bill, is in my debate class, we showed the Monty Python clinic on the argument clinic. And it's a really funny clip, if you've never seen it, you should go watch it. It's pretty entertaining. And so we show that, it's one of those things that historically kids always laugh. They think it's entertaining, it's very engaging, because Monty Python is always clever, not just funny, but they're clever because they have like some real facts and data and information in what they do. Like, it's really, really well done. And so I purposely sat back and watched and didn't do anything. And I saw the kids who pulled out their phones, and I just kind of took note. And they had no idea what happened. I got done and like, "Do you have any questions?" And they just had this blank look on their face, So sometimes there's this conversation that it's like engagement. If teachers were only more engaging, but you can't compete with the cell phone and the dopamine hit that Clash of Clans gives you, and your text from your friends. It's just not the same thing. So
Yeah, you asked kind of what about it is. Certainly it's academics, but to me, it comes down to what we call this device a cell phone, but what it actually is. So it certainly is a phone. You can use it to make a telephone call. But in the school context, it is also what used to be a note. When I was in school, you'd write a note or whatever to the girl you like, or your friend try to arrange something for after school, and you have to pass that note. And that was a distraction in class. That was a distraction. It took one time. But because the cell phone takes the place of that note, it is pinging students with notifications all day. It's, something happened on Instagram. Here's a text message from your friend. Depending on what kind you have at your house, it's like, oh, the camera in your bedroom recorded some movement because the wind blew the curtain or something, right? So all of these distractions over the course of the day mean that if there's no restriction, then it's I'm having every couple of minutes to look at this. So on the one hand, it's distraction. It's also a drug. Doug mentioned the dopamine hit. It's an addiction, and of course we don't allow drugs in schools, right? But this is one, and I know it's not a drug in that sense of the word, but it is a drug in the sense that it changes the wiring inside your brain, and addiction is not a good thing. And it's not a good thing in schools. And the reason that these are so popular, and the reason that kids are worried about a bill that might take it away, is because they are addicted. It's also a casino, right? You think about where underage gambling happens. It's on a phone. And it's also a movie screen. But beyond just being a movie screen, it's an adult movie screen. Where do kids see pornography for the first time? It's typically on a phone, but it's not their own phone. It's somebody else's phone, and that most often happens at school. So I just think it's so clear that the right policy from a state level is to just, our baseline for where these devices belong in schools is 0. But they also do have some educational advantages. But I think those advantages ought to be worked out at the school district level. And if they decide they want to have them in some rooms, and others. I know a friend of mine who's an art teacher, and she misses the cell phone because she would have her students use those to take pictures of things and then take them out and use them as a model for their art. So I can understand why it would be useful in some educational settings, but that decision ought to be made at the local level for what they want to do. But the state default policy should really be, these don't belong in schools unless or until a school and a school district decide this is where we think they belong, because that's where it can enhance education. Where right now cell phones are the way they're used, it's almost entirely a detriment to education and social development for kids.
So you call it a default position. So what does that mean? If it's only a default position, can the school boards change it? Can the teachers change it? What is that process?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I like about the bill, and I think Senator Fillmore was very ingenious the way he crafted this bill, is it is a default, meaning that this is really important to the state, but it does allow LEAs to make...
So tell us what an LEA is.
Yeah, back up. So LEA is a local education agency. That means a school board or a charter board, so any of our public schools. They can actually make that determination for themselves, and they might say, you know what, we really think that there's a meaningful use for our photography class to be able to use a cell phone versus a camera. They can make that policy, carve it out for themselves. If they decide that they want to have phones locked up in pouches, or if they want to have them just out of sight and in backpacks, that's totally within their purview to do that. They just have to make an active choice to do so, and they have to understand that they are, there's a reason why we've set the default policy, but they have the autonomy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then tell me about there's been some pushback on it about emergency situations, or the parent that says that they want to be able to talk to their kid during the day, or the parent that wants to remind them of their medicine, or specific apps that are involved with healthcare, things like that for the students. Tell me about, are there circumstances that this is allowed? Does the state say that, or is that left to the districts to decide?
That's a good question. So as I mentioned, I think the right state policy is a default of 0. Cell phones do not belong in schools. We should start from that and then choose where we want to add it back because this is where cell phones can be helpful. There's no doubt that cell phones have just created tremendous accessibility and technology in ways that really are helpful for people's health. So there's a statewide add back for people's health. A lot of people who have diabetes use a cell phone to monitor their blood sugar. So that's allowed in school. We have people who have anxiety disorders. I received an email from a parent whose kid has auditory processing disorders and needs to have earbuds in his ear. So that add back is taken care of at the state level. There are additional ones for if there's an emergency or if somebody's in real trouble, don't run to the office, just take out your phone and call 911, right? So there are those kind of state level add backs. And then beyond what the state has added back, then we just leave that to districts. And they really are free to adopt carte blanche, whatever policy they want. But the way the bill is structured is that they do that on a proactive basis. And it's a conversation with their teachers and their students and their parents. How can we use cell phones in schools to help our kids thrive while they're here? And if they can come up with a good answer to that question, they have the full freedom to be able to do that as they should. And I think what you'll find is that as this policy is kind of rolling out in Utah and across the country, just schools find that having no cell phones is a dramatic difference maker in how children learn at school and how children behave at school in positive ways all around.
And so why aren't we just leaving it to the school boards if they could make it? Or why does it need to be a state level policy?
I think the answer to that question is that's what it used to be, right? Schools were always free to do this. And in fact, like Granger High School in the Granite District and some other schools across the state did take this policy. But when the state is silent and the default position is 100% no restrictions, what we do is put schools in a position of asking, well, these are causing problems, so how are we going to try to handle this so that we limit the damage that cell phones cause to our kids? And I think schools will be much better off, kids will be better off, as this policy flips the question to, instead of how do we restrict them to limit the damage, it's where do we allow them in order to make improvements and to help kids thrive in school and in their social lives. That's a much better question to ask. And when you ask the right question, you end up in a much better answer.
Okay.
Yeah, and Senator Fillmore articulated that more clearly than I did, than I would. But we've had a no cell phone policy since the entire time. I'm in my 20th year teaching. We've had no cell phone policies, but they just kind of start to lose their teeth over time, and they became so ubiquitous in society, and people everybody starts using them. And we kind of knew that they weren't good, but it wasn't until Jonathan Haidt came out with the Anxious Generation and a whole bunch of other studies came out that went from like a correlation to causation of cell phones and the harm that they are having on our kids, where it became very clear that this is no longer an issue where we should be passive on it, but this is a high alert issue that's had a tremendous negative impact on our kids. And so I think it also helps our school boards be a little bit more bold as well to make those decisions as well. And parents. I mean, the number of parents who've reached out to me that have said thank you far outweighs the few that have said I don't like this. Like it's like 4 to 1, 5 to 1 on the number of people who said thank you. This helps us at home as well.
Okay. And then who is in charge of kind of policing this policy? Is that the teachers? Is that something that's placed on the teachers? Is the district's responsibility, the principals? Kind of where do you see, or where does this bill contemplate that?
Again, that kind of goes back to the local LEA decision, the local school decision. Some school districts have put it to the principals to figure it out, and some have district-wide policies. And so it's not going to be the same from school to school. So if you go to Granger High School, I believe has the Yonder pouches as a school they decided, and so kids come in, they lock up their phones. In the school that I teach at, in the district I teach at, it's largely policed by the teachers with support from administration, but that's the choice that they made. And so the administration has been very helpful, but if they're pulled out in the classroom, in our school we have a little lockbox, I guess, that we put in the lockbox, and they have to go to the administration to get it unlocked, and they kind of track that, and they get like one, and then their parent has to come in, and that has a tremendous impact as well too. So every school has the ability to implement it the way that they want, but I would argue that it still largely falls on the teacher to do, because they're in the class with the student the most.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think having a state law to back them up, I think is empowering for teachers.
Oh man, it's been,
I have yet to hear, except with the exception of this art teacher who would like to have it back for, for certain, any teacher who is anything but thrilled that they have this policy to help them enforce this in their schools. And, like with all new things, there's a couple of days at the beginning where, people kind of reset to the new expectation and the new normal. But since then, it has freed teachers up so much. In fact, we heard, as Granger implemented this policy, even before the law passed, the issue that they were facing the most with their teachers is that my lesson plans are no longer valid because I'm getting through the material so much faster. That's creating work for the teachers on on their preparation side to be able to keep up with the pace at which they can do things now, because kids are understanding the terms better, there are fewer distractions in class, kids grasp the material in a better way, and man, what a great consequence.
which is a strong argument for academics.
Yes.
Having strong academics, we want our kids to come out being prepared for the world.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
that's fantastic.
And so if passed, when would this take effect?
Would be next school year would be the effective date for this.
Okay.
So every school district, according to last year's law, already has a policy in place. So they would have the summer to be able to determine what tweaks they would like to make to their cell phone policy, if they just want to stick with what they got or move to the new default. But that would be in place for next school year.
Okay. And then if this is passed, what would you like to see? Like, what is the vision that each of you would like to see in 5 years? Are there other changes, or would you like to see kind of a system in place? What's kind of your vision for this?
Since I see Representative Welton here taking a breath, let me start off with,
Question.
so part of my vision would be that schools would implement this in different ways. And so that we can watch over the next few years, how is this working at schools that have kept the bell-to-bell restriction, and how is that working at schools that have still allowed it during class time, or maybe allow a flip phone but not a smartphone. I mean, there's so much variability that we can have on a school by school or district by district basis. I hope for that, because I hope to be able to see what the data shows, what the data show about this. And then, but I don't know, if I were in charge, what I'd like to see is fewer screens in school in general. And, we're talking about our bill, but there are other bills on here that kind of recognize that when technology was new and wow, this opens so many possibilities for improving education and making things more efficient. So screens, especially exacerbated by COVID, screens became such a prevalent piece of technology in schools with Chromebooks and tablets. I think there's pretty wide recognition among schools and policymakers that we maybe have swung that pendulum a little bit too far.
Yeah.
So I think this year we're seeing some pushback trying to get that to more of a balance and equilibrium place. So I would like to see in a few years that there are much fewer screens in schools as a replacement for teachers. Screens can be a great enhancement, and they can be a good way for kids to get practice with immediate feedback, but they cannot replace a high quality teacher. And what will set up a student for success is being in a classroom with a high quality teacher, with involved parents supporting that teacher at home. And technology can be an added benefit to that, but it shouldn't be a replacement. I think we've moved a little bit too far, so we need to see that.
No, I agree with that. I think technology can be a great augmenter to education, but it's a high quality teacher and parents.
Yeah.
Like, if I have success, it's probably due more to parent involvement in a positive way, and then secondary, it's me and my skills in the classroom. I'd just like to say I hope we don't have to address it again. I think the bill has carved that out pretty well, and I hope that we're good on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't. As we get that information over the next 5 years, I don't know that we need to do anything further at the legislature, because we've set the baseline in the right place and we've empowered districts to make that decision. And the districts will learn from each other. They'll get together and talk and find out where it's working.
And that's what I love too, that you were saying that I wasn't thinking about. But it's like, let's look at the data between the schools and let's see if this is working. Let's see which school is having the best the best outcomes based off of how they're implementing it. and schools are really good at like talking to each other and figuring that out. One other thing that I hope happens, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but I really hope that this kind of moves upstream into the home as well too, because we have a real difficulty with parents being detached from their children because they're on their phones all the time. And I am the worst, and my wife and my kids will tell you that with this job and everything else like that, like I'm on my phone an awful lot. But there's a lot of data that shows like when a parent is not looking at their child and having conversations and they're giving them screens at home and they come home and they're decompressing and so they're playing a game or answering emails and you're not having that conversations at home, that actually fragments attention and weakens the family. And so I really hope that this is not just a school plus, but this sends a message upstream to society as a whole that let's engage in more meaningful one-on-one conversations. Let's use our technology appropriately to augment society in proper ways, but let's not replace our interpersonal connections as a family, as students, as teachers. So that's what I hope.
Okay. And what would you say is kind of your last ending message? Just take a short time and say, like, what would be your last message to the parents or to the teachers or the people in general in our communities about this bill?
I would say lean into it. I know it's different and it's a little bit of a change from what we've done and we've kind of let it go for 10 plus years, but lean into it. Embrace those positive interpersonal connections that result of having less screen time. Use technology appropriately to augment your learning, but I would say lean into it. And I think this is a bill that will help everybody row in the same direction. We want high success for our kids. We want them to be successful in life, and this will help out. And I think it helps parents in that and teachers in that progression.
I agree. I'd say for me, it's with this bill, I'd say that this is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. And you touched on that a little bit earlier. That we want this to have broader impacts in how things are at home. But for me, like in 2018, I ran the free range kids bill, right? It was about let's get kids outside. And it's okay, parents, like you should let your kids ride their bikes to the 7-Eleven or the Maverick because they need the experience that comes from building independence and gaining that confidence. We ran the Every Kid Outdoors initiative. This year there's another resolution on that topic. This is part of that. Some other screen things, bills regarding screens in schools are part of that. I think my message, just kind of general overall, is people need people. And screens provide such a dopamine hit for both adults and children that we're losing some of those relationships. And social media is part of that, and just kind of the pervasiveness of cell phones and screens and video games are part of that. But nature is calling, family is calling, friends are calling. That's where we should work to prioritize time as people and as society. We would just be so much better off if we spent more time together and talking together and doing things instead of looking at screens. So this to me is just one piece of a broad change that is kind of been forced on society. Maybe that's the wrong word to say, but it just has kind of been accepted by society very gradually. And we need to stand athwart this effort yelling stop.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks.